Please, just this once. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes did not fall. Not even for a second. The cold night air brushed against her face, carrying the faint scent of rain and distant traffic. She stood at the edge of the wide stone driveway, small against the towering glass doors of the mansion. Her yellow apron faded under the dim exterior lights, her hands gripping the worn fabric of a bag held close to her chest. Inside, something fragile, something important. The door opened, just enough for him to step out. Daniel Whitmore, tall, composed, wrapped in a tailored coat that caught the light like it belonged there. His gaze dropped to her, slow, measured. Not curious, not concerned, just assessing. "I do not help people who beg," he said, his voice calm, almost bored. Like the sentence had been used too many times before. Naomi did not move. The words landed, but they did not break her. She inhaled quietly, steadying herself, her fingers tightening slightly around the bag. "I am not asking for much," she said, softer now, but not weaker, never weaker. Daniel's expression did not change. If anything, it hardened. "Just slightly. That is what they all say," he replied, already turning, already done. The door behind him began to close, slow, deliberate, like a final decision being made without effort. Naomi felt the shift, the moment slipping, the opportunity fading. But she did not step forward, did not raise her voice, did not plead again. Instead, she stayed exactly where she was, her shoulders straight, her chin level, her eyes fixed, not on the house, but on him. Even as he turned away, even as the space between them grew colder, seconds passed, stretched, quiet, heavy, the kind of silence that does not beg to be filled, but demands to be understood. The wind picked up slightly, brushing loose strands of her hair across her face, her breath visible now in the night air. But still, she did not move. Then, just before the door could close completely, her voice came again, softer, almost carried by the wind itself. "It is not for me." The words did not reach loudly, but they reached something in them, something in the way she said it, without urgency, without desperation, stopped the motion just enough. Daniel's hand remained on the edge of the door, his body paused, not fully turned back. Not yet, but no longer leaving. The silence returned, but it was different now. No longer empty, now it held something. A question, a shift, something unseen beginning to press against certainty. Naomi's grip on the bag loosened slightly, just enough for the top to fall open a little. Inside, a glimpse, simple items, food, medicine, worn, carefully packed. Not excess, not for comfort, but for need, real need. Daniel's eyes moved, just briefly, just enough to notice. And in that small, almost invisible moment, something inside him hesitated. Daniel did not close the door, not completely. His hand stayed there, resting against the cold metal edge as if something invisible had interrupted the motion. The night air slipped between them, quieter now, heavier. He did not turn around yet, not fully, but his eyes shifted again, back toward the small opening of the bag. Naomi noticed it, not with her eyes, but with the stillness in his posture. The kind of stillness that only happens when someone is no longer certain. She exhaled slowly, her breath visible again in the air. "It is for my brother," she said, her voice steady. No longer asking, just stating. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. Not in anger, but in something less familiar, discomfort. He turned this time, slowly, not out of obligation, but because something in her tone had changed the direction of his attention. His eyes moved from the bag to her face, really looking now for the first time. Not at her, but into her. Naomi did not step closer, did not try to fill the space. She simply held her ground, her fingers loosening slightly around the worn fabric. The top of the bag falling open just a little more, enough to reveal the edges of a prescription bottle, the corner of a folded paper. Daniel noticed, his eyes narrowing, not in suspicion, but in recognition. "How long?" he asked. The words came out quieter than before, less controlled. Naomi blinked once, surprised by the question. But she did not hesitate. 3 months? She answered. A pause, then softer, since he stopped speaking. The words hung in the air. Not dramatic, not forced, just true. Daniel's shoulders shifted, almost imperceptibly, like something inside him had just moved out of place. He looked away for a moment, toward the long driveway, the empty distance stretching into darkness, then back at her again. The silence between them stretched, but it was no longer empty. Now it carried weight. The kind that presses against decisions. Naomi's hands lowered slightly, not in surrender, but in fatigue. The kind that comes from holding on too long. Her eyes remained steady. But there was something behind them now, not desperation, but time, running out. Daniel's grip on the door loosened, his fingers sliding slightly along the surface. He took a small breath, then another, as if adjusting to something unfamiliar. "Why here?" he asked. Not sharp, not dismissive, just uncertain. Naomi hesitated this time. Not because she did not have an answer, but because the answer mattered, because you were the only one who did not say no, before I even finished speaking, she said, quietly. Daniel's expression flickered, just for a moment, something close to realization, or maybe recognition of himself in a way he had not expected. The wind passed again, softer now, lifting the edge of her apron, brushing against his coat, and still, neither of them moved, because something had already started, something neither of them had planned, and now, it was waiting for one of them to decide what happens next. Daniel did not answer right away. The question he had asked still lingered between them, but her answer, it had done something small, but enough to unsettle the certainty he had built around himself. He stepped slightly outside now, the door behind him left open just enough for warm light to spill onto the cold stone. The contrast caught in the space between them, light and shadow, distance and hesitation. "Most people would have left by now," he said, his voice quieter, less sharp. Naomi gave a faint nod. Not in agreement, but in understanding. "Most people have," she replied. A pause followed. Longer this time, heavier. Daniel's eyes drifted back to the bag again, then to her hands, worn, steady, not shaking anymore. Whatever fear had brought her here, it had already passed. What remained was something else, something harder to ignore. "And you think I am different?" he asked, not mocking, not dismissive, just unsure. Naomi took a breath, slow, measured, the kind of breath that carries more than just air. "I think," she began, then stopped, choosing her words carefully. "I think you have not decided yet." Daniel blinked. Once, the words landing deeper than expected, not because they accused him, but because they did not. They left space, and in that space, something uncomfortable began to grow. He shifted his weight slightly, the gravel beneath his shoes crunching softly, grounding him, reminding him where he stood, where he always stood, above, in control. And yet, it did not feel the same now. Naomi lowered the bag slightly, just enough for him to see more clearly. Inside, neatly arranged, not thrown together, each item placed with intention. A small container of food, wrapped carefully. A prescription bottle with a name half worn off. A folded piece of paper, edges creased from being opened too many times. Daniel's gaze lingered there, longer than before. His breathing slowed, then deepened, as if his body was catching up to something his mind had not yet accepted. "He is all I have," Naomi said, not louder, not softer, just true, the kind of truth that does not ask to be believed. It simply exists. Daniel looked at her again, really looked, and this time, he noticed the details he had missed before. The faint shadows under her eyes, the dryness in her lips, the way her shoulders carried more than just exhaustion. They carried responsibility, constant, unrelenting, and still. She stood, not asking for sympathy, not asking to be saved, just asking for a chance. The wind moved again, softer now, almost gentle, brushing past both of them like it no longer needed to push. Because something had already shifted. Daniel's hand finally released the edge of the door, but he did not close it. He did not step back inside. Instead, he stayed where he was, caught between two choices, the one he always made, and the one he had never considered before. And for the first time in a long time, he did not move, because moving meant deciding, and something inside him was no longer as certain as it used to be. The silence did not break. It stretched, deeper now, no longer waiting for words, but for something else, something harder. Daniel shifted slightly forward, not enough to close the distance, but enough to step out of where he had been standing, where he always stood behind the threshold. Protected, removed, now he was outside fully. The cold air touching him the same way it touched her equal for the first time. His eyes moved again, slower this time, tracing the details he had ignored before. The way Naomi held the bag. Not loosely, not carelessly, but like it mattered more than anything else around her. His gaze lifted to her face again, searching, not for weakness, but for something real, something he could not dismiss. "Why did you not go to a hospital?" he asked. The question came out more practical than emotional, but beneath it, there was something else. Naomi's lips parted slightly, then closed, then opened again. She took a breath, steady, but heavier now, because they asked for money before they asked what was wrong. She said, no anger, no accusation, just a quiet statement. Daniel's expression shifted, just slightly. A flicker of something unfamiliar crossing his face, something close to discomfort, or maybe realization. He looked away again, toward the lights inside his home, warm, steady, untouched by the cold outside, then back at her, standing there, without any of it, without protection, without certainty, and still, she had not stepped back. Naomi adjusted her grip on the bag. Not to show it, but to steady herself, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the prescription bottle inside, grounding herself in what mattered. "He used to talk all the time," she added, softer now, her voice dipping just enough to carry something deeper. "He would not stop asking questions?" A small pause, her eyes lowering just for a second, then lifting again. "Now he does not say anything." The words lingered, fragile, but not broken. Daniel listened, not interrupting, not dismissing, just listening, and something in that, something in the stillness of it, felt unfamiliar, like a space he had never stood in before. The wind passed again, gentler now, almost unnoticed, as if the world itself had quieted around them. Giving room, Naomi did not move closer. She did not need to. Whatever she had come to say, it had already been said. Everything else now depended on him. Daniel's hand lifted slightly, not toward the door, not toward dismissal, but then it stopped, suspended in indecision. His fingers curled slightly, then relaxed, his shoulders lowering just a fraction. The tension he carried not gone, but no longer fixed in place. He looked at her again, longer this time, without rushing to a conclusion, without protecting himself behind certainty. Just seeing, and in that moment, something subtle shifted. Not enough to change everything. Not yet, but enough to make staying feel heavier than leaving, and deciding feel unavoidable. Daniel's hand did not fall, but it did not rise either. It hovered there, caught between instinct and something new he could not name. The silence pressed in again. Thicker now, no longer empty, but full of everything he had not yet said. Naomi watched, not with expectation, not with urgency, but with a quiet awareness. She could feel it. The shift, small, fragile, but real. Her fingers loosened slightly around the bag again. Not to show him more, but because holding it so tightly was no longer necessary. The moment had already moved beyond that. Daniel exhaled slowly. The breath deeper this time, heavier, as if something inside him had just become undeniable. "If I help you," he began, then stopped, the words catching. Not because he did not know what to say, but because for the first time, the outcome mattered differently. He looked down briefly, at the stone beneath his feet, then back at her. What happens next? The question was incomplete, but it did not need to be finished. Naomi understood. She always had. She tilted her head slightly. Not in confusion, but in thought. Then I go back, she said, simply. Daniel's brow tightened. Just slightly. Back to what? He asked, and this time, there was no distance in his voice, no detachment. Only a quiet need to understand. Naomi hesitated, just for a moment. Not because the answer was difficult, but because it was honest. Back to taking care of him, she said, her voice steady, grounded. No expectation hidden behind it. No promise. No gratitude offered in advance. Just truth. Daniel blinked again. Slower this time. The answer landing in a place he was not used to opening. And that is enough? He asked. Almost under his breath. Naomi did not respond immediately. She looked at him. Not searching. Not asking. Just seeing him as he was in that moment. Uncertain, unguarded. It has to be, she said. Quietly. The wind moved again, brushing past them both. But now, it felt different. Less cold, less sharp. As if something in the space between them had changed the way it moved. Daniel's shoulders lowered slightly. The tension that once held him upright now loosening. Not gone, but no longer controlling. His gaze drifted once more to the bag, then back to her. Then to the open door behind him. The light inside still steady, still waiting, and for the first time, it did not feel like a barrier. It felt like a choice. His hand lifted again slowly, deliberately, not to close the door, but to open it further, the movement small, but undeniable. The light widened across the ground, reaching closer to where she stood. Naomi did not step forward. She did not assume. She simply watched, and in that moment, everything balanced. Not decided, not resolved, but balanced, waiting for the final movement. The one that would define what this moment meant, and whether it would end, or become something neither of them had expected. The door opened wider. Not all at once, but enough to change the space between them. The warm light stretched further across the ground, reaching the edge of Naomi's shoes, stopping there, like it was waiting for permission to go further. Daniel stepped back. Just one step, but it was not retreat. It was invitation. Unspoken, uncertain, and heavier than anything he had said before. Naomi did not move immediately. Her eyes shifted slightly, not toward the light, but toward him, measuring. Not his wealth, not his house, but his intent. The kind that cannot be hidden behind words. Seconds passed, slow, deliberate, the air still, the night quiet until finally. She took one small step forward, her foot crossing into the edge of the light, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause, as if that single movement carried more weight than everything before it. Daniel watched, not with control, not with authority, but with something quieter, something closer to awareness. He stepped aside slightly, giving her space, not directing, not leading, just allowing. Naomi moved again, slowly, her hand still holding the bag close, not loosening, not relaxing, because even now, this was not safety. Not yet. It was only possibility. She reached the doorway. The warmth of the inside air brushing against her face. Different from the cold outside, softer, almost unfamiliar. She paused there, right at the threshold. Not stepping fully in, not stepping back, caught between two worlds. Daniel noticed. His gaze following the hesitation. Understanding it without needing explanation. You do not have to decide right now, he said, quietly. The words careful, not pushing, not pulling, just offering space. Naomi looked at him again, and this time, something in her expression shifted. Not relief, not trust, but recognition. She stepped inside. Just enough, her body still angled toward the outside, as if she could leave at any moment. The light wrapped around her now, revealing details the darkness had hidden. The wear in her clothes, the exhaustion in her posture, the strength in the way she carried it. Daniel closed the door behind them. Slowly. The sound soft, final. Not as an ending, but as a transition. The outside world fading into silence, replaced by the quiet of a space that had never held this kind of moment before. He turned toward her again. Closer now, but not invading. Keeping distance. Respecting something he was only beginning to understand. Naomi adjusted the bag slightly, her fingers brushing over its contents again. Grounding herself. Reminding herself why she was here. Daniel noticed that too. The small movement, the purpose behind it, and for the first time, he did not look at the bag as an object, but as a story. One he had not taken the time to hear, until now, and in that quiet shared space, with no one else around, no noise, no distraction, just breath and presence. Something real began to form. Not through words, but through what neither of them said, and what neither of them could ignore anymore. Daniel did not move right away. Even after the door closed. Even after the warmth settled around them. He remained where he was, as if stepping further might break something fragile that had just begun to form. Naomi stood near the entrance, not exploring, not relaxing, her body still slightly angled toward the door. Ready. Always ready. Her fingers traced the edge of the bag again. A quiet habit now. Something that kept her grounded in a place that was not hers. The silence stretched, but it was no longer uncertain. It was full, waiting. Daniel finally took a step. Slow. Deliberate. Not toward her, but toward the space between them. Closing distance without pressure. You said he stopped speaking. He began. His voice softer than before. Almost careful. Naomi nodded, her eyes steady, watching him closely, not with fear, but with awareness. It was not sudden, she said, her voice low, measured. He just stopped answering. A pause, her gaze lowering slightly, just for a second, then lifting again. At first I thought he was tired, then I thought he was upset. Then, she hesitated. Not because she could not continue, but because continuing meant saying it out loud. Then I realized he was trying, but nothing was coming out. The words settled in the room. Quiet, heavy. Daniel listened. Really listened. His posture shifting slightly, shoulders lowering. The tension in his jaw easing just enough to show something else beneath it. Something unfamiliar. Something closer to concern. He glanced at the bag again. Then back at her. And the doctors? He asked. Naomi shook her head gently. They spoke more about cost than care. She replied. Not bitter. Not angry. Just tired. The kind of tired that does not complain anymore. It just states facts. Daniel inhaled slowly, the breath deeper now, as if the weight of what he was hearing had finally reached him. He looked around his own space. The polished floors, the quiet walls, the controlled environment where everything had always responded when needed, and for the first time, it did not feel like control. It felt like distance. Naomi remained still, not filling the silence, not pushing him toward anything, because she knew, whatever came next, had to come from him. Daniel's eyes returned to her, holding there, longer than before, searching. Not for reasons to say no, but for reasons he could not ignore. Where is he now? He asked, and this time, there was no distance left in the question. Naomi answered without hesitation. 2 blocks from here. A small pause. With a neighbor until I come back. The words landed simple, but undeniable. Something in Daniel's expression shifted again. Sharper this time. Not in anger, but in realization. 2 blocks. That close all this time. And yet, invisible to him, as if an entire world had existed just beyond his reach unnoticed. He took another step, closer now, not enough to invade, but enough to show intent. His hand lifted slightly, not toward dismissal, not toward distance, but toward decision, and for the first time, it did not stop halfway. Daniel's hand did not stop this time. It moved, slow, deliberate, but certain. He turned slightly toward the hallway beyond the living space. his body no longer split between two decisions. He had already crossed it. "Get your things," he said. His voice calm, but different now, not commanding, not distant, just clear. Naomi blinked once, the words reaching her, but not fully settling yet. She did not move immediately, her fingers tightening slightly around the bag again, as if confirming what she had just heard. "We are going to see him," Daniel added, and this time, there was no hesitation left in his tone. The room held still for a moment, not out of tension, but out of recognition. Something had changed, completely. Naomi's breath caught, just slightly, not in shock, but in the release of something she had been holding for too long. She nodded. Once small, controlled, but real. Daniel turned toward a side table, picking up his keys, the motion familiar routine, but the reason behind it, entirely new. He paused for a second, looking at them in his hand, then back at her, as if making sure this was not just impulse, not just reaction, but choice. Naomi adjusted the strap of the bag over her shoulder, her movements steady again, grounded. The purpose that brought her here now aligned with the path in front of her. She stepped toward the door, not ahead of him, not behind, but alongside, a quiet shift, but one that carried meaning. Daniel noticed, not with surprise, but with a subtle awareness, the kind that does not need to be acknowledged out loud. He opened the door, the night air returning cool, familiar, but no longer distant. They stepped outside together, the gravel crunching softly beneath their feet, the silence between them different now, no longer uncertain, no longer questioning, just moving toward something that mattered. Daniel glanced toward the street, the direction she had mentioned, 2 blocks, that close, and yet, something he had never seen. He shook his head slightly, almost to himself, a quiet realization settling deeper. Naomi walked beside him, her pace steady, not rushed, not hesitant, as if she had always known this moment would come. Even if she had not known how, the streetlights ahead flickered softly, casting long shadows across the pavement, stretching their figures forward, merging them briefly, then separating again. Daniel's grip on the keys tightened, not from tension, but from intention, each step now carrying weight, not of obligation, but of awareness. And as they moved down the driveway, leaving behind the space that once defined him, something else began to take its place, not power, not control, but something quieter, something that did not need to be proven, only chosen. The street felt different now, quieter, not because the world had changed, but because something inside him had. Daniel walked beside Naomi, his pace matching hers without thinking, no longer leading, no longer ahead, just present, the sound of their footsteps echoing softly against the pavement. Steady, unhurried, 2 blocks. It had sounded so small before, but now, each step seemed to carry more than distance. It carried awareness, something he could not step away from anymore. Naomi kept her gaze forward, focused, not on him, not on the past, but on where they were going. Her grip on the bag relaxed slightly with every step, not because the burden was gone, but because she was no longer carrying it alone. They reached the corner, a dim streetlight flickering above them, casting uneven shadows that stretched and folded with their movement. Daniel slowed slightly, his eyes scanning the quiet row of buildings ahead, smaller, older, worn by time. Nothing like the world he had just stepped out of. Naomi turned down a narrow walkway, her steps certain, now familiar. This was her world, her ground. He followed, not hesitating, not questioning, just choosing to stay in motion. A faint light glowed from a window at the end of the path, soft, warm, alive. Naomi's breath shifted, just slightly, something between relief and urgency. She reached the door, her hand lifting, then pausing for half a second, as if preparing for what she might find. Daniel stood just behind her, close enough to feel the moment, but not close enough to take it from her. She knocked, gently. Once, then again, the sound quiet, but full of meaning. Seconds passed, long enough to feel every heartbeat. Then, the door opened slowly, revealing a dimly lit room, simple, lived in, and inside. A small figure sat on the floor, still, silent, watching. Naomi stepped forward, her voice softer than it had ever been. "I am back," she said, and for a moment, nothing moved, nothing changed. The air held still, until the boy's eyes shifted, just slightly from her, to the man standing behind her. Daniel felt it. That small, almost invisible moment, where everything he had believed, everything he had chosen before, no longer mattered the same way. He did not speak. He did not step forward. He simply stood there, allowing the moment to unfold without control, without expectation. Because now, he understood. This was never about being the one who saves. It was about being the one who finally sees. And as the silence settled around them, no longer heavy, no longer uncertain, just real, something quiet, but irreversible took root.